I'm Fabian Calvo, Fabian for Liberty. Check me out at fabianforliberty.com. Also, new podcast episode today. It's already live. You can check that out at fabianforliberty.com, or you can, of course, subscribe to iTunes, The Fabian Calvo Show, where I break down why I may potentially be getting rid of this, and I think the reason will surprise you, and also have a great interview towards the latter end of the program. And then in the middle section, I cover more on the Ferguson riots, which I want to touch on here now because, you know, I've talked about this often where the media, whether it's the Malaysian missing jetliner, whether it is Trayvon Martin, or now whether it is this Michael Brown shooting incident, that's basically all they'll talk about for the next month. And all of these other big geopolitical and economic events get completely ignored. And remember, the corporate media that's basically run by about, or all media, basically run by about 5 corporations, about 85% run by about 5 corporations, they create the narrative, right? It's why, there's a reason why it's called programming, okay? Because they are programming the American population, and they're getting better at this with all the, you know, ninja backdoor Google algorithms and everything else, where they know people's, you know, habits, and they know what their thought process is, and they know how they can manipulate people. So they're getting better at the messaging more and more because people are actually buying into this. I talked about in the podcast the last couple of days how it could potentially backfire. At least I obviously hope it does. But of course, you know, when you have the so-called mainstream media reporting 24/7 on one event, they ignore a bunch of other stuff. And I thought one of the biggest events taking place right now is, of course, the central banker meeting that's happening in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, all this week. Central banks from around the world, the same central banks, mind you, that have created much of the economic devastation we've seen take place, not just in the last 6 years, but the banker coup that basically happened 100 years ago. Yeah, those same people are meeting all of this week. And, you know, a couple years ago, you had Ben Bernanke basically announce at this same meeting $85 billion a month of stimulus. Janet Yellen, the new Fed chief who speaks on Friday, what is she going to talk about? But I think what's important to really understand here is that this secret Fed meeting, which is what it is, you're not going to have reporters there interviewing these central bankers. This secret Fed meeting is really the key, holds the key to the Ferguson riots. And, you know, one of the things that I see all these riots, I see all these rioters, looters, and there's no question several peaceful, you know, a majority I think are peaceful protesters, but we know that the radical communist left that is now busing in people to agitate it, agent provocateurs, you name it, all to basically make the situation much worse. The police certainly haven't helped with the military response that they did, and I've already talked about this at length, so I'm not going to rehash that. But why is no one talking about the devastation of these black communities? You know, you look 50 years ago, there was real black neighborhoods, black communities had real thriving business sectors. Today, they've been completely wrecked. And the black community's been used as a political football by the so-called, you know, loving liberals in order to advance their communist agenda. I mean, it's just it's so freaking obvious that it's such a bottom line point that, you know, with the entitlement state, with the massive amounts of regulations, you look at a majority of black cities today, major population areas that are black, almost all of them are in left-wing run areas where economic, like Detroit, like St. Louis, like Memphis, where there used to be decent middle-class jobs for these people, but those jobs are gone because they've been replaced by the central bankers' globalization on record. This is all a plan, ladies and gentlemen. And that's why, you know, I hope that some what good can come from this is that people in the black community, I see some of these interviews, protesters on the street, the peaceful ones, not the thugs that are looting, that are basically using this guy being shot, which now it comes out that he was rushing towards the police. Multiple eyewitnesses are now backing up the story of the cop. But I'm not, again, I covered that in the podcast today. I don't want to get into that. You hear a lot of these peaceful protesters that are actually beginning to realize, like, wow, you know, there is full-blown economic devastation. The war on drugs is putting people in prison for smoking marijuana for years. There's all of these big policies that are directly harming these communities, which are legitimate issues, that when you look at it, it all comes back to the central planners and the central planners financing, funding mechanism that comes from the big central banks of the world. That, ladies and gentlemen, right there is the key issue. The real reason Ferguson's on fire is because of the economic devastation that has caused the grief and caused these communities and caused most young black males, which you have 80% of violent crime in America today committed by young black males, because their communities have been destroyed by the same people, mind you, that are working to destroy the middle class in America today, and the same people that are targeting white Christians, gun owners, Ron Paul supporters, you name it. I'm Fabian for Liberty. I'd love to hear, probably going to get a lot of haters on this one, but I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. Leave your comment down below, share your video, share this video if you enjoy it or if you hate it, whatever. Thanks for watching. I'm out.